What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Invincible. This is the aftermath to the Viltrumite war. I imagine because it's the aftermath, not a whole lot of people will watch this video, and woe betide them because this story is amazing. Okay, so here's the thing. As we covered in the last video, a bargain was struck between Freddie Mercury, the Viltrumite forces, and Mark and Nolan, right? And basically, Freddie Mercury and them said, we'll stay here, we'll intermingle, right? We'll procreate with your race, and then once we're back to our, at least gloriness, whatever it is, then things will commence from there, right? It's kind of left open-ended as to whether or not they'll actually end up going to war with each other. And for those of you guys who have read ahead, please don't spoil. The important thing here is Mark actually meets back up with his mom. And of course, he's got Nolan with him. And this is kind of a big deal because this is the first time in any real measure of time that Nolan and his former wife have actually kind of gotten back together, or at least seen each other for a prolonged amount of time. They saw each other for moments previously, but not for a lengthy period of time. Now, of course, as soon as Deborah sees Mark, she's like, where's Oliver, right? She immediately starts freaking out. Of course, that's when she's told Oliver's recovering, he's alive, right? He's on Telestria, he'll be taken care of. And that's when Nolan asks her, who's Paul? Because one of the things to keep in mind is, remember, after Nolan had left, Mark's mom didn't necessarily bounce around, but she did find herself attracted and in a relationship with a guy named Paul. And so with the two of them kind of talking and really becoming close, it was a little difficult for Mark to come to terms with, but eventually he did. And he's actually told by his mom, you need to go see Eve, right? She's not doing very well. And it's really one of those things where it's like, one, you need to go talk to your girl, but two, mom and dad need some alone time. That's kind of what that is. And so what you end up getting is really this kind of just yelling that's sort of going on. Now, in reality, for Deborah, she's got a lot of emotion built up, right? A lot of pain and a lot of anger built up from everything that had happened. She doesn't let it all out here in the moment. Instead, Nolan's kind of like, okay, so like you took another mate. And her response here is, it wasn't a mate, right? It's not somebody that I married. And even if I did, why would you be pissed? You were banging everything all over space, right? How many like aliens were you procreating with? Like literally, Mark showed up here with another son that belonged to you, saying that like, we have to raise him, right? So like, who are you to get mad at me about this kind of thing? And Nolan's response is, well, I'm not upset, I'm just kind of disappointed. Now, for her part, Deborah's right here, right? Nolan's got no reason to be mad, right? He's got no reason to even be upset. Now, in the middle of all that, Cecil comes barging in, right? The last person that needs to be here. Cecil comes barging in here, right? Immediately starts unloading on Nolan out of a bit of a panic, and then realizes, oh yeah, that's right, this guy's reformed, right? So the funny thing about this is, for all the pomp and circumstance about Cecil, as much as he kind of buffs himself up and makes himself up to be a big deal, no, like he's almost kind of panicking and is kind of glad the war's not coming. The reality is humanity would have been woefully unprepared, even with Cecil creating all these invincible, powered beings, right? Using all those alternate reality versions of Invincible and kind of like reforming them to turn them into basically henchmen, like robotic henchmen. Even then, it wouldn't matter, right? I mean, like they would still get obliterated, especially at the hands of the forces of all the other Viltrumites. But with the war being over, Cecil's kind of like, okay, cool. Now at that point, you pick up with Mark, right? The one thing you guys want to see, you pick up with Mark, he flies over there, he ends up coming across Adam Eve. He was like, hey, like it's me, like the war's over, I'm back. Everything's okay, baby. Everything's cool. We can all get back to normal. She's like, no, don't come any closer, right? And he's like, why? And then you see Adam Eve, she hates the way she looks, right? Like, Adam Eve, what happened to you, girl? I'll tell you what happened. Adam Eve got thick. That's what happened, man. Adam Eve got thick. But nonetheless, right, like at the end of the day, she feels hideous, right? She sees herself as exceedingly unattractive and hideous. Mark doesn't care, man. He's just happy to see his girl. And I totally understand, right? Like, I'd be the same way. I'd be like, man, girl, I ain't seen you in like 10 months, right? Like, I don't much care. And it's kind of crazy because Adam Eve's been like, she's been holding on by a thread, right? And that's one of the things to keep in mind is that Adam Eve was just crazy in love with Mark, right? Like head over heels in love with this guy. And she understood why he had to leave. Like the whole situation between Adam Eve and Mark like juxtaposes the whole situation with Nolan and Deborah in almost a perfect way, right? That where Nolan bailed out, Mark had to go, right? Mark didn't want to go, but he had to go, right? And he almost kind of went with her understanding and really did leave with her understanding why he had to leave in the first place. But nonetheless, for her, it's been extremely difficult, right? She recently got her powers back, which is kind of a cool thing. But for the most part, the emotional and mental anguish of knowing that Mark could die at any point while he's out there in this war was just a little too much for her to handle. Because at the end of the day, she thought Mark was dead, right? And that's kind of the big issue that goes on here is Mark told her explicitly, I don't know how long I'm going to be gone for. I could be gone for weeks, I could be gone for months, I could be gone for years, right? And she, he left with her knowing that, and she allowed him to leave knowing that, right? I guess try to make peace with it as best as she possibly could, but she didn't know, right? I mean, he's on like the other side of the universe. There was no way for her to know. And the reality is her imagination ran away with it, right? Her imagination ran away with the idea that Mark's dead. She never heard a single thing from him. For Nolan and Debbie, what you actually get here is this interesting scenario where Debbie's highly conflicted. And the reason for this is because as she's sitting down talking to Nolan, she says, the truth is, after seeing you again, things with Paul just felt wrong. Not that I believe a word of what you said, that you have feelings for me, that you regret what you've done. There's no way to come back from that. And the response of Nolan here is, and yet after seeing me, you could no longer stand to be with another man. And he says, I wish that there was some way to make you aware of just how much I've missed you. And the crazy thing is Debbie kind of wants to forgive him, but she can't bring herself to, right? That's the conflict coming in. That's the conflict coming in, right? When she looks at her husband, she doesn't see the Nolan that she was in love with and had Mark with, and they were going to live happily ever after. When she sees her husband, she sees a man that almost destroyed the world, fought, and almost killed her son in the process and then left. She sees a villain, right? She sees just a villain. More so than that, a villain that betrayed her son, and betrayed everything they stood for. A man that seemingly every word he said to her was a lie. And a lot of that's because for Nolan, he didn't realize that he actually cared about Debbie until she was gone, until he left. In that moment when he left, when he was talking to Mark, you guys remember that whole discussion. Whether you saw the show, whether you saw whether you read the comic, you guys saw that discussion. He looked down on humanity. Humanity was lower than he was. He even saw his wife Debbie as something akin to like a primitive ape, right? Something that was just kind of entertaining, right? Not really something to laugh at, but like humanity was so primitive in relation to the Viltrumites. They live for thousands of years. She'll die after 80. And so it's one of those things where you're kind of like, you see that she had kind of experienced all of that, right? Even when like the whole video was leaked to the public, right? When she saw all of that, she felt betrayed in the most egregious way because now she knows how he actually saw her. And then here he is now saying, I missed you, I loved you, baby, take me back. And how do you come back from that, right? How do you believe that? And she even says that, right? Nolan says, I can never take back what I did to you. I understand that. All I can say is that I was misguided, lost. There were so many emotions, conflicting thoughts. I had thousands of years of beliefs to overcome. You have to try and understand. The response, she says, is no. I don't have to understand a damn thing. You ruined my life. Don't you understand that? You ruined everything. And she says, I wish everything could go back to the way that it was before. And the response of Nolan is, things will never go back, but I'll never lie to you again. But that's the issue, right? That's the issue here. There are things that happen in a relationship, things that you will do, things that you will say, maybe not because you intend to, maybe because you intend to, but your relationship will cross a line that it cannot come back from. Things will never, ever, ever be the same. No matter how long things go on for, the rest of your life, right? Nolan could just continue on with Deborah until the end of her life, right? Because he'll outlive her, and she will never look at him the way she did before everything popped off in the beginning of the story, right? She'll never see him the same way. She'll never hold his hand the same way. She'll never kiss him the same way. She'll never make love to him the same way. It'll never, ever be the same as it used to be. It's just the way those things are. And so following that, you pick back up with Mark, right? When he gets back over to Eve's place and she's trying on her costume and she's like, does this make my butt look bigger? And Mark's like, damn, son. that thick, right? I mean, she looks good as hell. He's like, man, sweetheart, you don't need to lose that weight. And right, Mark's feeling it, son. He's absolutely feeling it. But you kind of get this bit of a discussion going on, right? And things kind of return a little bit to normal insofar as you have Eve who's over talking to Mark's mom and they're kind of, getting together and things are kind of getting back to normal a little bit. And in fact, they kind of, make some funny jokes about Mark and, when he was younger and some of those little embarrassing moments and things along those lines. But there's really a lot of familiarity and there's a lot of comfort with things going back to normal. And one of the things that happens is that Mark and Adam Eve actually end up going to visit the home of Immortal and Dupli-Kate, right? Only to find out that like they've been procreating like rabbits, right? They actually got a couple of kids going on. And they're like, man, now Eve immediately doesn't really take to the idea of the kids being there, right? She's just kind of like, huh, you know, she seems a little off about those kids. And so of course, you know, you have like Mark who thinks they're absolutely adorable, you know, and like Immortal's just like, yeah, man, the kids like, they like to eat early, right? Like, I hope you don't mind, like we've already made dinner. And Mark's like, you know, that's cool, man. It's like they're all kind of hanging out and they're eating and they're having a good time, right? Talking about the idea of having twins and so on and so forth. And it's kind of interesting, right? Just kind of a bit of a discussion and just general conversation there. Now there does come a point when Dupli-Kate's giving the twins a bath and Eve is there, but she doesn't want to be there, right? She seems just so uncomfortable, right? This discussion that they used to have when they used to talk about the idea of like, you know, Eve and Mark having kids and settling down, buying a house, you know, that kind of typical nuclear family, right? Midwestern American kind of thing. And it's one of those things where Eve just doesn't really seem to want to have anything to do with it anymore. Over the course of these last 10 months, there was just like an extreme shift in the way that Eve saw her life playing out with Mark versus the way she sees it now. But the funny thing is, it doesn't really have much to do with Mark, right? Instead, you know, when Eve is asked by Dupli-Kate, are you okay? She's like, no, I'm not. I am not okay. And she races out of the room, right? She basically hands the kids back over to Dupli-Kate and takes off. Once she gets outside, Mark's like, okay, what's going on, right? Kate said that you were crying and that, you know, you're upset. Like, what's going on? And where she initially tries to kind of brush it off, right? Wipe her eyes, clean herself up and say, I'm fine. I just needed some air. Mark knows her better than that. And Mark's like, you know, no, like what's going on, right? Like what's happening? You know, is it something that Kate said? Like what's going on? And Eve stops and says, no, you just need to listen. What she reveals is she had an abortion, right? And like the whole, like in her mind, the whole reason behind that is she was basically pregnant at the time that Mark left, right? Mark got Eve pregnant and she couldn't go through with a kid, right? She couldn't do it alone. She couldn't raise a kid by herself. She couldn't try to navigate these waters by herself, knowing her husband was probably dead out there somewhere. That the belief that her husband died had this massive impact on her, and she aborted her child in the process. And so at that point, she's not really able to handle the situation, right? It's why she ran away from the idea of kids, you know, when she was holding Dupli-Kate's kids, because it reminds her of the life that she gave up, right? It reminds her of something she sacrificed here. And so where Mark comforts her as best as he can, at the end of the day, it's crushing for him too, right? Because he could have potentially had a child here, and now he doesn't have one. And then you get probably one of the most asshole moments of the whole story where Dupli-Kate's like, I give him another week tops, right? Like, I love Eve, but she just can't keep a man happy. She's got way too many issues, right? It's a dickhead thing to say, to be honest. But at the end of the day, I guess she doesn't say it where Eve and Mark can hear her, because if she did, I imagine Eve probably would have just beat the hell out of her. At the end of the day, the two of them, you know, just kind of cry together. And this really seems to be, given the future depiction that we saw of Eve and Mark, the idea that like they just never really seem to get together, that almost seems like a guaranteed future, right? One way or another, it just doesn't work out between the two of them. Whether it's because Mark just never really tells her how she feels, and so she spends all this time pining over him, never moves on and finds anybody else and ends up miserable, or if it's because of the fact that something like this happens that drives a wedge. Because the reality is, when it comes to a decision like that, that can drive a wedge between two people, right? The loss of a child, whether it's through abortion or through like an early death from an accident, whatever the case is, that can kill relationships. And so the result of that is it seems like Mark and Eve are kind of at an impasse, and whether or not they'll get together, well, we'll just have to wait and find out. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Thank you guys for watching. I think what I might do next is do a full story of everything from the beginning up to the end of the Viltrumite War to kind of make sure you guys are refreshed, right? Because everything we cover after this will be built on the shoulders of the Viltrumite War. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.